Imagine this. You're strolling along a peaceful prehistoric riverbank, maybe humming to yourself, maybe debating whether the wheel will ever catch on. The air is warm, the cicadas are buzzing, and then splash. Out of the water rises a jaw so wide it could fit your entire body inside, without even needing to chew. Yes, tonight's bedtime story isn't about fluffy mammoths or noble hunter-gatherers. No, it's about the monsters, the true titans of Earth's past. The kinds of creatures that make you grateful you were born in an era with Wi-Fi, pajamas, and the kind of predators you can squash with a slipper. These were beasts so big, so terrifying, that if you had the bad luck of running into one, your last thought would probably be, "Wow, I really wish I'd stayed in the cave today." But don't worry. You're safe here. This isn't a documentary you have to survive. It's a story to fall asleep to. And I promise, I'll keep it soothing, slow, and maybe even a little funny. Think of me as your prehistoric tour guide. Except, instead of handing you a map, I'm gently tucking you in while telling you about things that could once eat a person in one casual, crunchy bite. So, fluff your pillow, pull that blanket a little tighter. We're heading back in time, way back. Past the pyramids, past the mammoths, past the moment when somebody first thought, maybe eating raw meat is a bad idea. We're going to the age of giants. And tonight, you're about to meet the beast that could swallow a human whole. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world, not as it is now, with traffic lights, buzzing phones, and the smell of leftover pizza wafting from your kitchen, but as it was over 100 million years ago. This is long before cities, long before humans, long before anyone had the bright idea to roast a marshmallow on a stick. The Earth then was both alien and familiar, a place recognizable in its greenery, its rivers, its skies, yet profoundly different in its scale and mood. The air was thick, literally thick. Humidity clung to everything, like a damp blanket you could never quite throw off. If you've ever stepped into a greenhouse on a summer day and thought, "Ah yes, this feels like soup," then you have a tiny taste of what it was like to simply breathe back then. Every lungful of air carried the warm perfume of vegetation and the buzzing hum of insects. Dragonflies the size of dinner plates skimmed over ponds, their wings catching the dappled sunlight, casting shadows that could make an unsuspecting creature flinch. And oh, the forests. Dense jungles stretched as far as the eye could see. Ancient conifers towered skyward. Ferns the size of small cars unfurled lazily in the undergrowth. And cycads plants that look like they can't decide whether they want to be palm trees or pineapples sprouted in unruly clumps. Insects crawled everywhere, reminding you that long before humans worried about rent or laundry, they would have worried about something much simpler, not swallowing a beetle while yawning. Water was the true lifeblood of this world. Rivers meandered across vast floodplains, feeding into swampy deltas that oozed with life. Lakes, shallow and murky, steamed beneath the relentless Sunday. Rainfall came heavy and sudden, pounding the ground until everything was mud, then retreating as quickly as it came, leaving behind pools where amphibians croaked their throaty serenades. Every patch of water shimmered with activity, from fish darting like quicksilver streaks to amphibians the size of dogs that plopped gracelessly into the shallows. If you listened closely, and of course, we're imagining that you'd hear the constant trickle of streams, the splash of animals wading, and occasionally, something much heavier moving just out of sight. But here's the thing about this landscape. It wasn't quiet. You may be picturing some tranquil prehistoric Eden, a place of peaceful ferns and softly flowing rivers. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? But in truth, it was loud, a living orchestra where every creature added its own voice. The calls of primitive birds echoed from the trees, high-pitched whistles mixed with croaks. Somewhere in the distance, the rumbling roar of a dinosaur vibrated through the air, reminding every smaller creature that yes, they were on the menu. Cicadas droned endlessly, buzzing so loud it felt like the entire jungle had its own electric current. The ground shook sometimes too, not from tectonic drama but from sheer size. Imagine a herd of massive sauropods lumbering across the horizon, each step like a drumbeat against the earth. They moved slowly, their enormous necks sweeping from side to side as they stripped leaves from treetops. It was a reminder that everything in this world was exaggerated, bigger, louder, hungrier. And yet, nestled among the shadows of this landscape, there were also quiet moments. Insects crawled along moss-covered logs, oblivious to the thunder of dinosaurs in the distance. Small mammals, timid little furballs, the ancestors of every cat, dog, and human scuttled through the leaf litter, noses twitching, hearts pounding, their entire existence focused on avoiding being stepped on or swallowed. They lived their entire lives like teenagers, sneaking home past curfew, hyper-alert, praying not to be noticed. In this humid, buzzing, swampy world, survival wasn't a matter of ambition or long-term planning. It wasn't about stock portfolios or meal prepping. It was about getting through today without ending up inside something else's stomach. The rivers, though beautiful, were especially dangerous. They glittered in the sun, beckoning animals toward them, promising refreshment and a drink to quench the dry heat. But the waters were deceptive. Beneath the ripples, shadows moved. Predators lurked, invisible until it was far too late. And that, of course, brings us to the beast we're building toward. But for now, sit with the image of that ancient world. The air wet with mist, the ground soft with mud, the trees so tall you'd need a telescope to see the tops. Imagine the buzz of insects all around you, the croak of creatures unseen, the slap of water against the riverbank. A place without the safety of walls or locks, a place where the night brought not silence, but the chatter of unseen hunters. It is into this stage that our story enters. A stage lush with greenery, thick with heat, alive with creatures you would never want to meet without a sturdy pair of running shoes and perhaps a flamethrower. A world where every shadow could hold something bigger, stronger, hungrier, and if you found yourself at the edge of a river, leaning down to drink, you would be wise to remember, the water wasn't always just water. Sometimes it was teeth. Now that you've got the prehistoric landscape painted in your mind, thick air, buzzing insects, suspicious rivers, it's time to meet the star of tonight's bedtime terror, Sarcosuchus imperator, or, as I like to call it, the crocodile that makes modern crocodiles look like bathtub toys. If you've ever seen a Nile crocodile on television dragging an antelope into the water, you probably thought, wow, that's terrifying, and you'd be right. But here's the thing, the Nile crocodile grows up to 20 feet long. Impressive, sure, but Sarcosuchus? This creature stretched to 40 feet. That's 2 Nile crocodiles end to end, with room left over for a tail wag. Its skull alone measured as long as a grown man. This wasn't just a crocodile. This was a reptilian school bus with teeth. And, oh, the teeth. Conical, sharp, and plentiful, designed not to chew but to grip. If Sarcosuchus grabbed you, there was no negotiating, no wriggling free, no witty comeback that might distract it long enough for you to escape. Its jaws were lined with over 100 teeth, each perfectly engineered for clamping down on prey and never letting go. It had a snout elongated like a grotesque smile, and at the tip of that snout was a strange bulbous bump. Scientists believe this feature may have helped it amplify sounds or reinforced its bite. Personally, I think it just made it look like the world's deadliest rubber duck. Now, the name Sarcosuchus means flesh crocodile, which, if you ask me, is a little redundant. What were the other crocodiles made of? Marshmallows. But the name stuck, and it does fit, because this thing really was a monster, carved from pure appetite. Living during the Cretaceous period, around 112 million years ago, it lurked in rivers across what is now Africa and South America. Back then, those regions weren't the parched deserts we see today. They were sprawling wetlands, lush and brimming with life, a buffet for a predator of Sarcosuchus's size. Imagine, if you will, a dinosaur strolling down to the water's edge, maybe a young one, curious, thirsty. It lowers its head to drink, and in a flash, the water explodes upward. Out of it surges 40 feet of prehistoric muscle, a jaw snapping shut with a force estimated at over 18,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, That's like dropping 3 cars on your head at the same time. The dinosaur barely has time to realize its life choices were questionable before it vanishes beneath the surface, dragged into the murky depths by a beast older than fear itself. And don't think for a second that early humans would have stood a chance. Even with our clever brains and opposable thumbs, even if you armed a group of cavemen with spears, it would have been like trying to fend off a freight train using cocktail straws. Thankfully, Sarcosuchus was long gone by the time humans ever appeared. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be here discussing it. We'd be a footnote in some crocodile's digestion history. Now, what made Sarcosuchus particularly frightening wasn't just its size but its patience. Like modern crocodiles, it was an ambush predator. It didn't chase its prey across the land. It didn't roar like a tyrannosaurus and charge. No, it waited. It watched. It lingered just beneath the surface of the water, still as a log. And when something unsuspecting got close enough splash, it struck with horrifying speed. The true terror wasn't seeing it, but not seeing it until you were already in its jaws. Scientists believe Sarcosuchus could eat just about anything it wanted. Fish, turtles, dinosaurs, anything foolish enough to wade into its waters. Its sheer size meant it could dominate the river ecosystem. Think of it as the unchallenged ruler of its domain, the boss you never wanted to meet in the hallway. Other animals didn't mess with it. They couldn't. It was simply too large, too powerful. Yet, for all its menace, there's something oddly comforting about Sarcosuchus. It reminds us how precarious life once was. Today, our greatest river danger is maybe slipping on a wet rock or forgetting sunscreen. Back then, a sip of water could be your last mistake. And yet, life went on. Animals learned to live alongside this monster, adapting, surviving, evolving. In some strange way, the existence of beasts like Sarcosuchus is proof of the resilience of life itself. So as you imagine drifting along that prehistoric river, try not to panic. Picture the shadow of a 40-foot crocodile gliding silently beneath the surface, ancient eyes watching, jaws waiting. And remember, you're safe here, tucked in bed, the only snapping sound being the gentle creak of your pillow. The most unsettling thing about Sarcosuchus wasn't just its sheer size. Yes, being 40 feet long and heavier than a school bus already gave it an air of intimidation, but size alone doesn't tell the whole story. What made this creature such a nightmare was its bite, the mechanical masterpiece of muscle, bone, and teeth that turned it from a big reptile into a legend of prehistoric terror. And, if you'll allow me to be blunt, it was a mouth built for one purpose: making sure whatever it bit didn't get back up again. Let's start with the jaws. Modern crocodiles already have some of the strongest bite forces recorded in the animal kingdom. Scientists have measured them clamping down with thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush bone like it's stale popcorn. Now imagine doubling, maybe tripling that force. Sarcosuchus's jaw could exert an estimated 18,000 pounds of pressure. That's not a typo. That's the weight of 3 pickup trucks stacked on your ribcage. If that sounds like a lot, it's because it is. You could be the fittest, fastest, most gym rat version of yourself, and all that training would mean nothing when those jaws locked around you. No amount of push-ups prepares you for becoming a chew toy the size of a garden pea to a super croc. And then there were the teeth. Sarcosuchus had more than 100 of them, conical and sharp, designed not for slicing like a shark's, but for gripping. Think of them like nature's version of meat hooks. Once those teeth sank in, escape wasn't on the menu. The shape of the teeth meant prey didn't slide out, no matter how much thrashing or wriggling they attempted. It was like being caught on a set of prehistoric fish hooks, attached to a living monster. But Sarcosuchus didn't need to chew. Chewing is for animals that like to savor their food, to break it down into manageable bits. Sarcosuchus, on the other hand, was the original fast food restaurant. One bite, one swallow, and you were gone. Its mouth was wide enough to engulf prey whole, especially smaller dinosaurs, mammals, or anything foolish enough to wander into its strike zone. To call it gulping down dinner almost undersells it. This was more like nature's garbage disposal, powered by raw evolutionary efficiency. Imagine being a mid-sized dinosaur, perhaps a young hadrosaur, dipping your head to drink from a quiet river. You lower your snout, sip the cool water, and then without warning, the surface beneath you becomes chaos. Sarcosuchus launches upward, mouth wide like a cavern, teeth flashing. In one motion, it clamps down across your torso, lifts you clear off the ground, and with a single thrash of its head, you're tossed deeper into its mouth. There's no chewing, no delicate table manners, just gravity pulling you straight down the reptilian throat. Dinner is served, and it's you. That's why one bite was enough. It wasn't just the physical power of the jaws, though that alone could snap bones like twigs. It was the whole package. The speed of the ambush, the locking grip of those teeth, and the wide throat designed to swallow prey whole. And because Sarcosuchus spent most of its time in water, it also used drowning as a weapon. Anything it grabbed, no matter how feisty, could be dragged beneath the surface and held there. Imagine being strong enough to wrestle a dinosaur, but then choosing not to bother just pulling it underwater and letting time do the work. Efficient, if a little morbid. Now, here's where the humor sneaks in. Picture a Sarcosuchus at a prehistoric dinner party. Dinosaurs show up, turtles shuffle in, fish wiggle around nervously. The croc waits, hidden in the punch bowl, and when everyone leans in for a drink, snap, party's over. It didn't need strategy meetings or hunting lessons. It didn't need fancy claws or sharp horns. It had the ultimate Swiss Army knife of death, a mouth so powerful and so absurdly oversized that one bite could settle the matter. If you're thinking this sounds excessive, you're right. But excess was the point. Sarcosuchus lived in a world of giants, dinosaurs on land, massive fish in the water. To compete, to rule, it needed a weapon that worked every time. Its bite wasn't just a tool, it was a solution to every problem. Hungry? Bite. Threatened? Bite. Curious? Bite. It's fair to say, Sarcosuchus wasn't big on subtlety. Even today, scientists studying its fossils marvel at the design. The skull fossils, sometimes 6 feet long by themselves, show the wide gape, the reinforced structure, the teeth lined up like cruel piano keys. When paleontologists reconstruct it, they often admit there's something unsettling about the scale. A crocodile skull is already intimidating. Double it, and you get something that makes even hardened researchers step back and think, well, thank goodness this isn't alive anymore. So when we say one bite was enough, we don't mean it in the casual sense of someone trying a spicy taco and deciding they've had enough. We mean it in the final sense. One bite ended the story. For Sarcosuchus, dinner wasn't an ordeal of chasing and tearing. It was a simple equation: strike, bite, swallow, no fuss, no leftovers. And that is why even the shadow of this creature, beneath the water, would have been enough to make any sensible animal reconsider drinking from that river. Now picture yourself, not as a giant predator, but as one of the smaller creatures trying to survive in this world. Rivers were the heart of prehistoric life. They were the places where animals gathered to drink, to feed, to cool off from the relentless Sunday. For early mammals, and later for early hominins, the river was both a lifeline and a gamble. Every sip was a calculated risk. The riverbank itself was a noisy, bustling scene. Herds of herbivorous dinosaurs would trudge in, their tails sweeping the air, their feet kicking up dust. Turtles crawled awkwardly to the shallows, where they'd flop with a splash and vanish into the muddy depths. Fish leaped from the surface, glinting in the sunlight before disappearing again. And small, furry mammals, our ancient ancestors, skittered through the undergrowth, noses twitching as they considered the most strategic way to approach the water without becoming lunch. For hominins, those early, upright primates that one day would become us, the river was a necessity. Water was survival, and survival meant taking risks. Imagine crouching at the edge, cupping your hands, knowing that beneath the surface might be a predator you could never hope to fight. You'd learn to approach cautiously, scanning for ripples, looking for anything that resembled a log but wasn't. You might even try to wait until larger animals came first, hoping they would draw the monster's attention. Safety in numbers, though, to be fair, being the smallest in the crowd, often meant you were the appetizer. But life at the riverbank wasn't just fear. it was also community. Animals gathered there, and with them came opportunities. For predators on land, it was a hunting ground. For scavengers, it was a chance to find scraps left behind. For hominins, it became a place of observation, watching the patterns of other animals, learning when it was safest to drink, figuring out which spots were shallow enough to cross quickly. This was the beginning of strategy, the kind of thinking that would eventually make humans successful. Still, danger was constant. Every splash could be the start of a tragedy. Sarcosuchus and its smaller crocodilian relatives patrolled the shallows like shadowy landlords. Dinosaurs sometimes ventured too close and vanished. Birds swooped down to catch fish, but risked becoming prey themselves. Even the vegetation could be treacherous. Tall reeds hiding both food and fangs. If you were an early hominin, your senses would be on high alert. Your ears tuned to the slightest ripple, your eyes scanning for movement in the water. Even your nose might betray you the smell of mud, fish, and death mixing in the humid air. You would never truly relax at the riverbank. It was like stopping by your favorite cafe, except the cafe might kill you without warning. And yet, the river remained irresistible. Water was too vital, fish too nourishing, the ecosystem too rich. Early humans began to adapt in small ways. They approached in groups, keeping watch while others drank. They learned to carry water back in leaves or shells, minimizing trips to the edge. Over countless generations, this cautious dance, with danger shaped not only survival strategies, but social bonds. Sharing water, watching each other's backs, it wasn't just practical. It was practice for cooperation, the very glue that would hold human communities together. Picture the scene again. The riverbank at dusk, fireflies beginning to glow, dinosaurs lowing in the distance as they move away for the night. Early humans huddle together near the trees, wary but determined. The water glitters faintly in the fading light. Beneath the surface, unseen but always present, Sarcosuchus drifts silently, as much a part of the river as the current itself. For those who lived on its banks, danger and necessity were inseparable. And somehow, despite the odds, they endured. Picture, if you will, an early human scruffy hair, dirt on his cheeks, probably smelling like he wrestled a mammoth, and lost, sitting by the campfire at night. Around him, his family gathers, tired from a day of trying not to become someone else's snack. The little ones stare at him wide-eyed, waiting for the evening lesson. And tonight, the lesson is crocodiles. He gestures dramatically toward the river in the distance, eyes wide with mock terror. "All right," he says, in whatever version of words he can string together because, let's face it, language back then was probably more like interpretive grunting than polished storytelling. "You see log? Floating log? Don't trust log. Log has teeth." The children lean in, their tiny jaws hanging open. One brave kid asks, "But father, log no bite, log just float." The father shakes his head gravely, as if imparting the deepest cosmic truth. "Ah, that's what log wants you to think." Log waits. Log watches. Log dreams of you walking too close. Then snap. He claps his hands together, startling the kids so badly, one of them drops the half-chewed root they were gnawing on. This, I imagine, was the earliest form of a public service announcement. Not a billboard, not a pamphlet, not even a safety video, but a caveman warning his kids that nature had invented the cruelest practical joke, a stick of wood that suddenly turned into a death machine. The mother chimes in, rolling her eyes, clearly having heard this story before. "It not log, it monster." She sighs, tired of her husband dramatizing. Everyone knows. But still, she adjusts her children's sleeping mats a little farther from the riverbank, just in case. Because once you've seen a Sarcosuchus in action, you don't laugh about logs anymore. Now, imagine the humor in their daily paranoia. Every stick, every branch floating downstream, every shadow beneath the water, it could all be a croc. I like to think that prehistoric families developed inside jokes about it. Maybe one of the kids sneaks up behind his brother holding a big branch, growling, "Log with teeth," and everyone bursts into nervous laughter. because joking is easier than thinking about the real thing waiting in the river. Humor, after all, has always been humanity's way of dealing with terror. Even today, when we talk about crocodiles, we make jokes. Don't wrestle one, someone says, unless you're from Florida. Or, they just want to play fetch with your leg. Back then, the jokes were simpler, but the purpose was the same. Keep the kids alert, but don't traumatize them too much. A little laughter makes survival lessons easier to swallow. Unlike prey, which Sarcosuchus could swallow whole without laughter at all. You can almost imagine how these early humans might exaggerate their encounters for dramatic effect. It was this big, the caveman insists, holding his arms out as wide as possible, while his wife mutters, it was half that size. No, bigger. Big as tree. Big as cave. Big as sky, he continues, losing all sense of proportion. Embellishment was probably part of the culture too, because if you have to face monsters daily, why not turn the storytelling into a form of entertainment? The truth was frightening enough. And so, the myth of the log with teeth became more than just a safety tip. It became a story shared around fires, passed down through generations, each retelling adding flair and humor. The message was always clear. Water is dangerous. Logs can bite. Don't be fooled. And yet, despite the warnings, someone always tested fate. You know there had to be one guy, let's call him Og, who strutted to the river, declared, I strong, no fear log, and then immediately vanished in a flurry of splashes. Lesson learned the hard way. The funniest part, perhaps, is that the description, log with teeth, isn't all that inaccurate. Even today, when you see a crocodile floating in the water, its body perfectly still, its eyes just above the surface, it does look exactly like a piece of driftwood. Except, driftwood doesn't blink. Driftwood doesn't slowly paddle closer without making a sound. Driftwood doesn't explode out of the water with enough force to rearrange your plans for the week. So, as the fire crackled and the prehistoric family drifted off to sleep, I like to think their dreams were full of floating logs. Some harmless, some very much not. And the caveman father, satisfied with his performance, leaned back thinking, yes, good story. Kids will remember. And maybe they won't end up like Og. Humor, fear, survival all braided together in one ridiculous, terrifying bedtime story of its own. If you think Sarcosuchus was just a problem for mammals or the occasional adventurous hominin, think again. This wasn't just a creature that threatened the little guys. This was a predator bold enough and big enough to take on dinosaurs. And not just the tiny chicken-sized ones, either. We're talking about dinosaurs that could tower over you. Dinosaurs that in their own right seemed invincible until they took one step too close to the water. The riverbank was the great equalizer. Dinosaurs might rule the land, but the water belonged to Sarcosuchus. Imagine a young sauropod, neck stretched out like a massive crane, lumbering toward the shallows. To such a creature, the water is refreshing, a place to cool off. But beneath that surface lurks a shadow, silent and patient. The dinosaur lowers its head, its tongue laps the water, and then suddenly eruption. Sarcosuchus explodes upward, jaws snapping shut on tender flesh. The dinosaur rears back, trumpeting in shock, but the damage is already done. Blood stains the water. Panic ripples through the herd, and the unlucky youngster is dragged under. This wasn't an everyday occurrence. Dinosaurs weren't stupid. Even the ones with tiny brains understood danger eventually. But the element of surprise gave Sarcosuchus the advantage. A log with teeth is scary enough. A log with teeth that weighs 8 tons and has the patience to wait hours for the perfect strike. That's a nightmare. Even dinosaurs couldn't shake. Some paleontologists believe Sarcosuchus specialized in hunting aquatic prey like giant fish and turtles. But others point out its size, its jaw strength, and its sheer audacity. It's hard not to imagine it taking a shot at any dinosaur foolish enough to wade too deep. Think of it as nature's bouncer at the club of survival. Sorry, you're not on the list. Into the water you go. Even predators weren't safe. A theropod, sharp-toothed and cocky, might lean too far into the river chasing a fish, only to find itself yanked in by something even deadlier. The roles reversed in an instant. The hunter became the hunted. It must have been chaos, splashes, roars, water churning red. The croc thrashing, its massive head side to side, breaking bones, pulling its prey deeper into the murk where strength doesn't matter, only lungs and luck. And dinosaurs weren't built for swimming contests against 40-foot reptiles. Of course, the great comedy of it all, if you can call prehistoric terror comedic, is imagining the dinosaurs holding group meetings afterward. Picture them huddled together, muttering, "All right, who's on river duty? No volunteers? Fine. We'll send the new guy." They learned quickly, as all survivors do, that rivers were not just watering holes. They were arenas where the odds shifted dramatically, where even a massive dinosaur could be humbled by the jaws of Sarcosuchus. And yet, dinosaurs kept coming, because life needed water, and the river was non-negotiable. So this grim dance repeated itself again and again. Crocodile waits, dinosaur drinks, jaws snap, panic follows. For Sarcosuchus, this wasn't a dangerous gamble. It was Tuesday. What makes this so striking is that dinosaurs were the ultimate icons of power in their time. They were the kings and queens of the land, colossal, armored, ferocious. And still, they had to bow to the river lord. The Sarcosuchus was proof that in every kingdom, no matter how mighty, there's always something scarier, waiting in the shadows. Or in this case, beneath the ripples. So if you ever doubted the croc's credentials, if you thought maybe we exaggerated its terror, just remember this. It wasn't just scary to us. It wasn't just scary to mammals. It was scary to the creatures that defined an entire age. Dinosaurs ruled the earth, but Sarcosuchus ruled the rivers. And sometimes, that was enough to topple giants. Imagine for a moment being Sarcosuchus. You wake up, or whatever passes for waking up, when you're a 40-foot crocodilian and the world is already in your favor. You don't need to sprint like a cheetah. You don't need to roar like a lion. You don't even need to get out of bed. If bed is defined as a muddy, algae-filled puddle of riverbank, your day is simple. You wait. That's it. Patience is your greatest superpower. The dinosaurs can strut and stomp and fight each other with horns, but you just hang out, mostly submerged, with only your eyes and nostrils breaking the surface, looking like nothing more than a particularly lumpy log. This was the essence of the Sarcosuchus lifestyle. It was an animal designed for stillness, perfected for ambush. While the rest of the prehistoric world bustled with noise-trumpeting sauropods, screeching pterosaurs, chattering insects, the super croc embraced silence. Its massive body, heavier than an elephant, floated just beneath the surface, suspended by buoyancy and centuries of evolutionary design. Muscles coiled in stillness, jaws primed, every nerve focused on a single event. The next poor creature that made the mistake of getting close enough. And let's face it, plenty of creatures did. Rivers were irresistible. They offered water to drink, fish to catch, mud to roll in, and coolness against the punishing Cretaceous Sunday. Dinosaurs wandered down in droves, massive bodies crashing through reeds, long necks dipping toward the shimmering surface. Turtles floated like prehistoric frisbees, utterly unaware of what lay beneath. Fish darted in schools, their scales flickering like silver rain, and every single one of them was being watched by eyes that hadn't moved in hours. Because Sarcosuchus didn't need to chase. It didn't need to expend energy running around like some desperate predator hoping to get lucky. No, it was an apex predator that had unlocked the most efficient strategy in the book. Wait for your food to come to you. Imagine if every meal you ever wanted just walked over to your couch and politely stood there until you felt like eating. That was life for this beast. A perpetual all-you-can-eat buffet, provided you had the patience to wait it out, and patience it had in abundance. Sarcosuchus could hold still for hours. Imagine staring at the same patch of river, eyes unblinking, muscles quiet, heart rate so slow, it barely registers, just waiting. To us, that sounds boring. To Sarcosuchus, it was strategy. It was the art of invisibility, because as long as it didn't move, Everything else assumed it was just part of the scenery. A log, a shadow, something benign, until it wasn't. Then came the strike. A sudden eruption of chaos. The quiet shattered in an instant. The jaws opened wide, the water exploded upward, and the victim had no chance to react. The power of the ambush wasn't just in the jaws themselves, but in the sheer surprise. 1 second, you're sipping water, thinking about your day. The next second, you're halfway inside the throat of something that's been watching you for 3 hours straight. What's particularly chilling about this daily routine of doom is how effective it was against animals of every size. For small fish, it was over in a blink. For medium-sized dinosaurs, it was terrifying, like being mugged by a log. Even larger animals, ones too big to swallow in a single bite, could be grabbed and dragged beneath the surface to drown. Sarcosuchus didn't need to chew. It could wait for its prey to tire out, lungs filling with water, then tear it apart with the infamous death roll, spinning its massive body to rip chunks of flesh free. And here's the kicker. It could do this again and again. Sarcosuchus didn't need to eat every day. Its metabolism was slow, its appetite spread out over weeks. That meant more waiting, more lurking. Day after day, the same routine: submerge, wait, strike, swallow, rest, repeat. Somewhere in there, maybe sunbathe for a while, letting your enormous scaly body absorb heat from the blazing Cretaceous Sunday, then back into the water, back to patience, back to being the worst surprise party host in history. You can almost imagine what it looked like from the victim's point of view. A calm river, nothing but ripples, a sip of water, a reflection of the sky. And then suddenly, the surface turns into jaws, your whole world, narrowing to teeth and darkness. To be caught by Sarcosuchus was to learn too late that the most peaceful-looking part of the environment was also the deadliest. And so, this daily routine wasn't just survival, it was domination. It was a way of controlling the very flow of life in the river ecosystem. Every creature that approached the water had to weigh the risk. Every sip of water, every attempt to cross, every dive for fish was shadowed by the possibility of becoming dinner. Sarcosuchus didn't just live in the river, it ruled it. And its throne was patience, carved from stillness, crowned by the inevitability of jaws that only needed one good strike to end the day's hunger. Now, while Sarcosuchus was perfecting the art of underwater ambush and mastering the daily grind of patience, somewhere down the long road of evolution, a very different kind of creature was trying to figure out something much simpler: fire. Yes, while the supercroc was swallowing dinosaurs whole without breaking a sweat, our ancestors were probably smacking rocks together in frustration, hoping a spark would appear so they could roast a root vegetable without burning their fingers. It's hard not to laugh at the contrast. On one side, you have a 40-foot apex predator, jaws stronger than industrial machinery, lurking silently in a Cretaceous swamp. On the other, you have proto-humans huddled in caves, pointing at lightning strikes like, "Hey, look, hot sky magic." The crocodile needed no tools, no planning, no teamwork. Its existence was a streamlined killing machine. We, on the other hand, were basically toddlers trying to operate a microwave without knowing what a microwave was. Fire, of course, was revolutionary. It gave warmth, protection, the ability to cook food, and the beginnings of culture around a shared hearth. But let's not forget how hilariously clumsy it must have been at first. Imagine two early humans crouching over a pile of sticks, one rubbing stones together furiously, the other impatiently blowing on the unlit pile. Hours pass. Nothing happens. Then finally, a spark. The pile smokes. Triumph fills their hearts. But just as the flame flickers, one of them sneezes, and the fire goes out. They look at each other, exhausted, questioning whether dinner is even worth it. Meanwhile, in a swamp thousands of miles away, Sarcosuchus is enjoying an entire dinosaur without so much as lifting a claw. The difference highlights just how uneven the playing field was in those times. Sarcosuchus didn't need innovation. It didn't need discovery. Its power was inherited, etched into its bones by millions of years of evolution. Humans, in contrast, were fragile, small, and defenseless. But we had curiosity, and curiosity, clumsy though it was, gave us something even Sarcosuchus couldn't dream of: progress. Still, in those earliest days, progress must have felt laughably slow. It took centuries, maybe millennia, for humans to consistently make fire. Think about that. Generations lived and died, trying to master something that today we do with the flick of a lighter. Imagine explaining that to Sarcosuchus. Yes, it took us thousands of years to figure out how to not eat raw meat. The crocodile would blink slowly, unimpressed, then go back to swallowing its dinner whole. And yet, this is the beauty of the contrast. Sarcosuchus was built for immediate power, immediate dominance, but it was also trapped by its design. It would never learn fire. It would never paint on cave walls, never share stories around a hearth. It would never invent marshmallows to toast. Humans, meanwhile, stumbled, fumbled, and probably burned their hair a few times. But once we figured it out, we opened a door that changed everything. So while the crocodile's daily routine was doom and patience, ours was trial and error, failure and persistence. And though in that moment, the scorecard wasn't even close, Sarcosuchus could erase us from existence in one bite. The long game belonged to us. We were learning how to control something beyond ourselves, something that gave us warmth in the cold and light in the dark. Sarcosuchus had dominance. We had potential. Still, the image is hilarious. On one side of history, a beast so terrifying it could ambush a dinosaur without trying. On the other, a group of scruffy proto-humans dancing around a smoking stick pile, shouting in celebration as if they'd conquered the world. Maybe that's exactly what makes us human, finding joy in small victories, even when surrounded by monsters. Because yes, Sarcosuchus could crush us in a heartbeat, but we had sparks. And eventually, sparks became fire. And that was enough to keep our story alive, long after the last supercroc sank beneath the prehistoric rivers. When you think of humans today, you probably imagine us sitting comfortably at the top of the food chain. We've got cities, supermarkets, and delivery apps that will bring ice cream to your door at midnight. If you want sushi, you don't dive into the ocean and wrestle a tuna, you order it and wait for the doorbell. But rewind a million or so years, and the story was very different. Back then, humans weren't kings of anything. We weren't emperors of the ecosystem. We were, to put it bluntly, snacks. Small, stringy, not very filling, but available in abundance for anyone who was hungry and had the teeth to prove it. Imagine early humans walking across the savannah. They weren't striding with confidence like they owned the place. They were glancing nervously at the grass, ears twitching at every rustle, constantly wondering if the next shadow was lunch or their doom. The prehistoric food chain didn't recognize us as rulers. To a saber-toothed cat, we were bite-sized. To a giant eagle, we were portable. To crocodiles like Sarcosuchus, we were appetizers served at the edge of the water. And the cruel truth is that our ancestors didn't have many defenses. No claws, no fangs, no armored shells. Not even the luxury of running particularly fast. Imagine competing in a prehistoric Olympics. You're up against a cheetah in the 100-meter sprint, a bear in the wrestling event, and a hawk in archery. Humans wouldn't even get a participation medal. At best, we'd be the halftime entertainment, demonstrating how easily one can trip over a rock while fleeing. Our only advantages back then were brains and teamwork, but even those weren't always reliable. You can imagine two early humans crouching near a river. One says, "You go drink first, I'll watch your back." The other, suspicious, replies, "No, you first. I'll guard." Both stare at the water, knowing that beneath it lurks something that doesn't care who goes first, because it will happily take them both. In the food chain, hesitation was as dangerous as recklessness. And it wasn't just the crocodiles. The entire prehistoric world was stacked against us. Lions and leopards today are dangerous, but their ancestors were larger, meaner, and probably had less patience for being interrupted while eating. Hyenas back then weren't just scavengers, they were powerhouses, capable of taking prey outright. Birds of prey were so enormous they could swoop down and carry off small children like takeaway meals. Even snakes had ambitions, some reaching lengths so massive they could crush a human before the poor creature even realized it had become a burrito. This is why calling humans hunters in prehistory is a bit of a stretch. Sure, eventually we learned to hunt, to craft tools, to work together. But for much of our early existence, we were hunted more often than we were hunting. We lived cautiously, sticking close to cover, forming groups not out of love for community, potlucks, but out of desperate need to avoid being singled out. Safety in numbers wasn't just a saying, it was the difference between passing on your genes or becoming dinner. Think of it this way. If Earth was a restaurant during the prehistoric era, humans weren't the chefs. We weren't the managers. We weren't even the customers. We were the side dishes, always on the menu, seasoned lightly with fear. And the predators knew it. They adapted to our weakness. They lay in wait. They studied the edges of our movements. Sarcosuchus, with its patience and power, must have found humans to be easy pickings whenever they strayed too close to the water's edge. A hairy, two-legged animal leaning down to scoop water? That's practically nature's way of delivering takeout. Yet, even as snacks, humans began to learn. Slowly, painfully, sometimes comically. They invented sharp sticks. They threw rocks. They screamed loudly to scare predators off. None of these tactics were foolproof, but little by little, they carved a space for themselves. Still, it would be thousands of years before they could even dream of dominance. At this stage of history, they weren't feared. They weren't respected. They were tolerated. Like pigeons in a city park present in great numbers, occasionally annoying, but always available for the hawk that happens to be flying by. So when we picture Sarcosuchus and its river domain, we have to remember that humans weren't rivals. They weren't challenging it for territory or resources. They were simply part of the buffet. In the hierarchy of the prehistoric food chain, humans weren't the lions of the plains or the wolves of the pack. They were small, bony, slightly chewy snacks, and the crocodiles knew it. Now let's talk about what exactly was on the menu for Sarcosuchus. If you imagine a crocodile today, you know it isn't picky. They'll take fish, birds, antelope, and the occasional unlucky tourist who ignored the warning signs. Multiply that lack of pickiness by a factor of 10, and you've got the appetite of the supercroc. This was not a gourmand with refined tastes. This was a creature whose dinner plate looked like the world's most terrifying buffet. Start with fish. Ancient rivers were teeming with them, some growing to sizes that would make today's salmon look like minnows. Sarcosuchus had no trouble with fish. With a quick lunge, it could snatch them straight from the water, jaws snapping shut before the poor creature even registered movement. The teeth of Sarcosuchus were perfectly suited for gripping slippery prey, ensuring that once caught, the fish had no chance of escape. For smaller crocodiles, fish might be the main meal. For Sarcosuchus, they were the hors d'oeuvre, the breadsticks of the river. Then there were turtles. And not the cute, palm-sized turtles we see today. These were prehistoric tanks, shells thick and bodies heavy. Most predators might think twice about tackling one. Sarcosuchus didn't think at all. It simply bit down, jaw pressure shattering shells like porcelain. Dinner served, with crunchy packaging included. Of course, the most dramatic items on its menu were dinosaurs. Not the towering giants that shook the earth with every step, those were too large, even for Sarcosuchus, but the young, the small, the reckless. A juvenile hadrosaur wandering too close to the water was fair game. A small theropod stopping for a drink might become a quick snack. Even larger creatures, if caught off guard, could be injured badly enough to fall prey. Imagine the water exploding, the croc's jaws clamping down, and a young dinosaur dragged under. That scene probably repeated countless times across prehistoric rivers. And yes, if early primates or proto-humans happened to wander too near, they too would have been on the plate. To Sarcosuchus, there was no difference between a dinosaur, a fish, or a human. Meat was meat. If it moved and fit in its jaws, it was edible. It's humbling to think that our ancestors, desperate for a sip of water, might have been snapped up without ceremony, becoming just another item on the crocodile's long and varied menu. The key to Sarcosuchus's success was this adaptability. It didn't rely on one type of food. It didn't specialize. It was opportunistic, willing to eat whatever was available. And in a world full of prey, that meant it was never hungry for long. Fish in the morning, turtle for lunch, dinosaur for dinner, primate for dessert. Variety may not have been the spice of life for Sarcosuchus. It wasn't exactly adding herbs and plating dishes carefully, but it ensured survival. Its diet also shows how it shaped its environment. By preying on everything, it controlled populations, maintained balance in the river ecosystem, and ensured that no species could take the waters for granted. To live near Sarcosuchus was to live under constant threat. Every ripple in the water could be the last thing you ever saw. The image of its dinner plate is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. On one side, you imagine a crocodile crunching through the shell of a prehistoric turtle, water foaming with the violence. On another, a dinosaur disappears beneath the surface, its cries echoing across the riverbank before silence returns. And somewhere, perhaps, a small primate watches from the trees, heart pounding, whispering the prehistoric equivalent of, "Nope." Sarcosuchus ate without remorse, without hesitation, without discrimination. Its dinner plate was the river itself, and anything foolish enough to step into it. For millions of years, this menu worked perfectly. And though the monster is long gone, the echoes of its appetite remain in the crocodiles of today. Every group in prehistoric times must have had that one unlucky soul. You know the type. In modern offices, it's the intern sent to fetch coffee. In ancient hunter-gatherer tribes, it was the poor caveman, tasked with what was perhaps the most terrifying job description in history: go test the river. Now, testing the river wasn't a ceremonial event. There were no badges of honor, no promotions, no applause. It was simply a matter of survival. The group needed water, but nobody wanted to be the first to lean down, because leaning down could mean becoming part of Sarcosuchus's all-you-can-eat lunch special. So, naturally, someone had to be volunteered. And let's be honest, it was rarely voluntary. Imagine the scene. A family or small tribe gathers near the edge of a swampy river. Everyone is thirsty. The sun beats down relentlessly, and children whimper, clutching their throats. The adults glance at one another nervously, each pretending to study the trees, the sky, anything but the murky water. Finally, someone points at the least intimidating member of the group. Maybe he's a cousin who once fell asleep on guard duty. Maybe he's the guy who can't throw a rock straight. Either way, he gets the honor. Go on, they grunt, motioning him forward. He stares at the river, heart pounding. He knows what happened last week, when Og the Brave decided to fill his hands first. Og never came back. Og is now a fond memory, and, presumably, crocodile compost. But thirst is a powerful motivator. And besides, the group is watching. Nobody wants to look cowardly in front of their peers, even if cowardice is exactly the correct instinct when faced with a 40-foot reptile. So he creeps forward, one step at a time, placing his feet with exaggerated care as if being quiet is going to fool a predator that has been waiting motionless for 6 hours. He crouches at the edge, leans forward, and very gently touches the water with the tip of a stick. Everyone holds their breath. Nothing happens. Relief washes over the tribe, but not him. He knows it's too easy. The water is trickster clear, the surface calm, the current gentle. He can almost hear Sarcosuchus laughing under there, thinking, "Patience. Little snack. Patience." He dips the stick deeper. Still nothing. Emboldened, he dips his hand in, scooping a little water to his mouth. The group murmurs in approval. He drinks. He drinks again. Still no splash. Still no eruption. Just the sound of his swallowing, echoing in the heat. Maybe, just maybe, the river is safe today. He turns, triumphant, water dripping from his chin. He wants to grin, to puff out his chest, to bask in the glory of not being dead. And then, of course, there's a splash. A fish, perhaps, leaping innocently from the water. But to the tribe, it sounds like doom. They scream. He screams. The children scatter. The women grab their baskets. He falls backward onto the bank, scrambling in the mud, certain that death has come. The fish plops back into the water with a tiny ripple, utterly unaware of the panic it caused. Silence follows, broken only by his ragged breathing. The tribe, reassured, laughs nervously. He sits in the mud, humiliated, his heart still thundering. Someone mutters, "Good job, Tester. Very brave." It doesn't sound sincere. This scenario must have repeated itself countless times. Testing the river was both a necessity and a comedy of errors. Sometimes the tester survived. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he drank peacefully. Other times he vanished mid-sip. But the humor lies in the ritual itself, the sheer absurdity of sending one person to see if the monster was hungry today, as if Sarcosuchus were a restaurant taking reservations. The role of river tester was, in essence, humanity's first internship. No pay, no respect, and a high chance of fatality. Yet, someone always had to do it. And in that daily gamble, the tribe survived. One tester at a time, one nervous sip at a time, humanity inched forward, proving once again that sometimes the bravest among us aren't those who fight monsters, but those who put their hands in the water, knowing full well they might lose them. Sarcosuchus may have been the reigning terror of the rivers, but it wasn't the only creature in Earth's history capable of swallowing humans in one gulp. If you take a look at the oceans and jungles of prehistory, you'll find that one-bite wonders were almost a recurring theme, as if nature kept experimenting with how terrifying it could make its predators. And two stand out above the rest: Megalodon, the colossal shark, and Titanoboa, the snake that redefined what it meant to be overgrown. Let's start with Megalodon. Imagine the great white shark we all know today, the one that inspired entire movie franchises about not going into the water. Now multiply it by 3. Megalodon stretched up to 60 feet in length, with jaws wide enough to swallow a small car. Its bite force was estimated at more than 40,000 pounds, enough to crush a whale's skull like a walnut. If Sarcosuchus could take down dinosaurs on land, Megalodon owned the oceans, devouring whales, dolphins, and any other unlucky creature that crossed its path. Humans, of course, never met Megalodon in the flesh. It went extinct long before our ancestors were dipping their toes in the surf. But it's impossible not to imagine the horror of being in the water with one. Picture paddling on a log, enjoying a calm day at sea, when suddenly the surface beneath you drops into shadow. The water goes dark, colder, and then the jaws rise 2 stories high. Teeth serrated like steak knives, closing around you with all the inevitability of a collapsing building. You wouldn't even get to scream. You'd just be gone, filed neatly into the predator's stomach. And then there was Titanoboa, the heavyweight champion of the snake world. Growing nearly 50 feet long and weighing over a ton, this serpent slithered through ancient rainforests like a living nightmare. Unlike today's snakes, which are frightening enough when they appear in your shoe, Titanoboa could crush a crocodile in its coils. It didn't strike with venom. It didn't need to. Instead, it wrapped around its prey, squeezing tighter and tighter, until lungs collapsed, bones cracked, and resistance ceased. Then it swallowed the meal whole, unhinging its jaw to accommodate whatever unfortunate animal had just been reclassified as dinner. The idea of Titanoboa slithering silently through the undergrowth, scales brushing against ferns, is enough to make your hair stand on end. Early primates must have lived in constant fear of such creatures. Every rustle in the jungle could be the sound of a leaf falling, or a 50-foot snake preparing to rearrange your skeleton. Imagine waking in the night, hearing the faint hiss of scales, and realizing that the darkness itself was moving toward you. Together, Megalodon and Titanoboa formed a gruesome trio with Sarcosuchus, proving that Earth in its prime was less like a peaceful paradise, and more like a never-ending horror film with very bad odds for the cast. Rivers weren't safe, oceans weren't safe, forests weren't safe. Everywhere, there was something that could eat you in a single bite. And yet, here we are. Somehow, our ancestors dodged the jaws of crocodiles, the coils of snakes, and the teeth of sharks long enough to invent pajamas, bedtime stories, and eventually, sleep aid videos about those very monsters. There's a strange comfort in that thought. The same creatures that could have swallowed us whole also sharpened our instincts, forcing us to become clever, cautious, and cooperative. They may have been nightmares made flesh, but they also made us who we are. Given everything stacked against our ancestors, the crocodiles waiting in the rivers, the snakes sliding through the undergrowth, the cats with teeth longer than kitchen knives, it almost seems impossible that we made it. By all accounts, humans shouldn't even be here. We were slow. We were soft. We were basically naked, except for a thin covering of hair that did little more than make us itch when it rained. But somehow, we endured. Somehow, we found ways not only to avoid being a permanent feature on someone else's menu, but eventually to climb to the top of that very menu ourselves. How did we do it? Not with strength, not with claws, and certainly not with bone-crushing jaws. We survived because we learned strategies that weren't about fighting, but about avoiding fights altogether. The first of these was simple: stay away from water unless absolutely necessary. Rivers and lakes were death traps. You might survive the lions of the plains or the leopards in the trees, but if you leaned down to drink from a crocodile's home, odds were good you wouldn't lean back up again. So our ancestors became cautious. They developed a kind of sixth sense, a suspicion of calm water that still lives in us today. Even now, most people hesitate before swimming in murky lakes, eyes darting toward the shadows beneath the surface. That primal fear is the echo of survival. Climbing trees was another. We weren't built for sprinting across the savannah. But trees were allies. Our hands could grasp branches. Our feet, awkward on the ground, found purchase in bark. Up in the canopy, the world was safer. Not predator-free snakes and big birds still prowled, but safer than being exposed on the open ground. A human ancestor scrambling up a tree at the first rustle in the grass wasn't being cowardly. They were being practical. Better to look ridiculous dangling from a branch than to be dragged away into the bushes by something with a mouth twice the size of your head. And then there was teamwork. If you picture an early human facing down a predator alone, the odds were terrible. But in a group, things changed. A lion might hesitate to attack a cluster of shouting, stick-wielding humans. A crocodile might think twice if multiple eyes were watching the water, ready to sound the alarm. We survived because we learned to depend on one another. We became lookouts, hunters, protectors, caretakers. When one person spotted danger, they shouted. When one person was injured, others helped. Cooperation wasn't a luxury. It was survival insurance. This teamwork extended into clever tricks. Some groups learned to throw stones to keep predators at bay. Others developed the habit of approaching dangerous areas in groups, with one or two watching while the others drank. You can imagine the whispered strategies. You go first. No, we go together. Fine, but if something grabs me, hit it with a stick. Primitive? Sure. Effective? Surprisingly, yes. Over generations, these habits became instincts. Suspicion of shadows in water, comfort in climbing, reliance on teamwork. They were burned into us. They kept our ancestors alive long enough to pass on their genes. And slowly, cautiously, they built the foundation for something greater. From fear came strategy. From strategy came survival. From survival came time. Time to learn fire, to craft tools, to grow brains bigger and sharper. It wasn't glamorous. There were no great victories carved into stone. Our survival was built on small wins, avoiding one ambush, spotting one predator, saving one child. But those small wins added up, generation after generation, until eventually, the prey became the predator. That's why we survived anyway. Not because we were strong, but because we were clever enough to admit we weren't and adapt around it. It's tempting to romanticize prehistory, to imagine our ancestors walking freely beneath starry skies, living simply, close to nature, unburdened by taxes or traffic jams. But the truth is darker. Prehistory wasn't peaceful. It was a time of constant anxiety, a low-level hum of fear that never really went away. Every rustle in the grass, every ripple in the water, every shadow in the trees might mean death. Anything larger than you was a potential predator. Anything smaller than you was probably still dangerous in its own way, venomous, sharp, or just plain irritating. Life was less about thriving and more about not being eaten before nightfall. Imagine waking up each day, not to an alarm clock, but to the nagging question, will I survive until sundown? Your stomach is empty, so you need food. But food is out there, and out there is full of teeth. You want water, but water hides jaws. You want shelter, but even caves have occupants, bears, snakes, things that consider your family an eviction notice in the form of a meal. And the predators were relentless. Big cats lurked in the tall grass, camouflaged until they pounced. Enormous birds soared overhead, eyes sharper than knives, ready to pluck the unwary. Crocodiles and snakes haunted the edges of rivers and forests. Even at night, safety was a fragile illusion. Darkness amplified danger. The sounds of predators carried through the air, growls, screeches, splashes. You huddled close to others, fire crackling faintly, praying it would be enough to scare the monsters away. The psychological toll must have been immense. Constant vigilance, constant fear, constant adrenaline. Today, anxiety means worrying about emails or whether the car will pass inspection. Back then, anxiety was wondering if the shadow by the water was just a shadow or the last thing you'd ever see. The human brain itself was shaped by these pressures. Our heightened awareness, our ability to notice small movements, our instinctive startle at sudden noises, all of these were survival mechanisms, honed in an age when hesitation meant death. And yet, the dark side of prehistory wasn't just external. Hunger gnawed at bellies. Disease struck without warning. Injuries were often fatal, a simple broken bone leaving someone unable to flee. Infants were fragile, and many didn't survive their first year. The harshness of life made loss a constant companion. Entire families could vanish in a single bad season, wiped out by drought, predators, or plague. Humor, as strange as it sounds, was part of the coping mechanism. You can imagine our ancestors laughing nervously at the absurdity of it all. Did you hear about Ugg? Thought he could outrun a lion. Guess not. Laughter didn't erase the fear, but it made it tolerable. It bonded people, lightened moments heavy with dread. The darkness of prehistory wasn't just endured, it was managed, one nervous chuckle at a time. So when we look back and think of that time as simpler, we should remember that it was anything but simple. It was a world of constant uncertainty, a daily struggle not to be eaten. And in that crucible of fear, humanity's resilience was forged. We survived not because the world was kind, but because we learned to endure its cruelty. The dark side of prehistory shaped us. It made us wary, adaptable, and stubbornly determined to see another sunrise. Picture this. It's a sweltering day on the edge of a prehistoric river. The sun is blazing overhead, shimmering against the water. Dragonflies the size of dinner plates hum lazily through the thick air. And the children of the tribe are staring longingly at the cool, inviting current. They want to splash, to play, to escape the heat. The parents, however, know better. They've seen what lurks beneath those calm ripples. They've lost neighbors, friends, cousins snatched in a flash, pulled under, bubbles rising as the surface closes again, as if nothing had happened. But how do you warn the children? How do you stop the curious? Words are primitive. Gestures only go so far. And not everyone listens when you shout, "Don't go near the water," unless you want to get eaten. So one man, or perhaps one slightly more creative cave person than the rest, gets an idea. If words don't work, maybe pictures will. He crouches on the riverbank with a stick and begins scratching into the mud. The first attempt is crude. A circle with stick arms, a wavy line beneath it, and something like a giant mouth full of jagged triangles. He stabs the stick into the drawing with dramatic flair. See? Man goes near water, big mouth eats. The children look at it, tilt their heads, and immediately giggle. To them, it looks like Uncle Thok, with bad hair, but the point is made. Maybe, just maybe, this crude drawing is the world's very first no swimming sign. Of course, it wouldn't stop there. Once the tribe realized the picture worked, they'd want something more permanent. A flat stone might do. They'd paint or etch it with red ochre, leaving a warning that could last even after the rain washed the mud away. The image grows more elaborate. A human stick figure, dangling from the jaws of a massive crocodile, legs flailing in comic agony. If you've ever seen modern warning signs, bright red circles, big exclamation marks, dramatic stick figures, falling off cliffs, you know we still use the same idea. The caveman's doodle wasn't just art. It was survival through communication, and the humor of it lingers. Imagine future archaeologists discovering one of these crude signs carved into stone. They analyze it in detail. Papers are written, conferences held. Clearly, one expert proclaims, this is evidence of ritual crocodile worship. Another insists, no, it depicts an early myth about humans transforming into fish. Meanwhile, the truth was much simpler. It was just one exasperated parent trying to keep their kids from becoming lunch. The comedy becomes richer when you picture how the tribe enforced it. Someone is always tempted to ignore the rules. Maybe a cocky teenager struts toward the water, pointing at the crude carving and laughing. What? This? Just a drawing. I'm not afraid of a doodle. He splashes his feet, showing off. The tribe gasps. Mothers cover their eyes. And if he's lucky, he gets nothing more than a startled fish brushing past his toes. Lesson learned. For everyone else, the drawing suddenly feels like prophecy. Over time, these little warnings might have spread. Tribes along the same river could share them, passing down a tradition of scratched logs, carved stones, and smeared mud drawings. One can imagine an entire line of signs marking the territory of Sarcosuchus. It wasn't government regulated. It wasn't OSHA approved, but it was effective enough to keep at least some humans from strolling obliviously into the jaws of death. It's oddly comforting to think that our modern science cartoon stick figures slipping on wet floors or being electrocuted by a lightning bolt are direct descendants of this primal instinct. Long before neon paint and laminated plastic, humans understood that a funny drawing can carry a deadly, serious message. And maybe the caveman artist, sitting back and watching his little signs stop a child from wandering too close, felt a swell of pride. He had invented not only the first safety warning, but also, inadvertently, the first cartoon. So, the next time you see a "No swimming dangerous currents" sign at a beach or lake, picture its ancestor, a mud-scribbled stick man being devoured by a triangle-toothed log. The humor might make you smile, but the message hasn't changed. Stay out of the water, or the water might stay in you. For millions of years, the world belonged to giants. Crocodiles the size of buses, snakes that could strangle a cow without breaking a sweat, sharks as long as a city bus, birds taller than a grown man. Humanity lived in the shadows of these monsters, scrambling to survive, often reduced to little more than a footnote on the food chain. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the giants began to vanish. The reasons were many. Climate shifted, continents moved, temperatures rose and fell in brutal cycles. The lush, swampy wetlands that fed Sarcosuchus dried into deserts. The warm oceans that sustained Megalodon cooled and shrank, taking away its prey. Dense tropical forests thinned, robbing Titanoboa of the cover it needed to ambush. Bit by bit, the ecosystems that had supported these monsters collapsed, and when their environment failed, so did they. For humans, this was a strange kind of miracle. Suddenly, the balance of power tipped ever so slightly in our favor. The rivers were still dangerous. Yes, modern crocodiles survived the purge, but they were smaller, manageable. The ocean still had sharks, but none that could gulp down a whale whole. The jungle still had snakes, but none long enough to stretch across a basketball court. Life was still perilous, but it was survivable. For the first time in history, humans had breathing room. Imagine the relief of our ancestors. For generations, they had lived under constant threat, eyes scanning the horizon, ears twitching at every splash. And then, slowly, the threats became fewer. Still deadly, but fewer. A group could approach a river and not automatically assume that a monster large enough to eat a dinosaur was waiting beneath. A child could play near the forest edge with only the usual dangers, leopards, perhaps, or venomous snakes, not creatures so large they could topple a tree just by slithering past. Of course, humans didn't immediately recognize what was happening. Extinctions take thousands of years, sometimes longer. One generation still feared the monsters. The next whispered about them. 1,000 years later, they were legends. The Sarcosuchus became a log with teeth in the stories. Titanoboa became the great serpent of myth. Megalodon became the sea dragon that lurked beyond the horizon. The creatures faded from reality into memory, and from memory into folklore. But their disappearance gave humans more than safety. It gave us opportunity. Without the constant overshadowing of giants, humans could expand, experiment, and innovate. We could spend less time hiding and more time building. Fires grew brighter. Tools became sharper. Tribes spread farther, no longer bound, to the narrow safe zones that kept them away from the monsters' lairs. In the spaces left behind by extinction, humanity grew. Still, the ghosts of those giants linger. Even today, when we swim in the ocean, some part of us imagines the shadow of Megalodon rising from the deep. When we see a large snake coiled in the jungle, we feel the echo of Titanoboa. When a crocodile slips into the water without a ripple, we picture the supercrocs of the past. The fear is still with us, etched into our bones. The difference is that now, the monsters are myths. It is a curious irony. The climate changes that devastated ecosystems and destroyed giants also helped carve a path for us. Their downfall gave us breathing space, and in that space, we became something more than prey. We became storytellers, builders, hunters. The end of the giants was, in a way, the beginning of us. So, when you tuck yourself into bed tonight, safe under your blankets, think of it as a kind of cosmic trade-off. The world lost its colossal crocodiles and monstrous snakes, but in return, it gained us fragile, anxious, persistent humans. We filled the space they left behind, and though our nightmares still remember them, our reality no longer has to. One of the most curious things about humans is how easily we startle. A splash in the water, a shadow moving just beyond the campfire light, the rustle of leaves behind us, we whip around instantly, hearts pounding, muscles tensed. Most of the time, it turns out to be nothing more than a fish, a breeze, or maybe just our imagination. But the speed of our reaction tells a deeper story, one that stretches back to an age when being jumpy wasn't a personality quirk. It was the difference between life and death. Fear, as inconvenient as it feels when you're trying to sleep at night after hearing a drip in the bathroom, is one of the oldest survival mechanisms our species has. And the particular fears that live inside us are not random. They were carved into our instincts by the monsters of prehistory. Sarcosuchus and its kind left more than fossils. They left behind traces in our DNA, little alarms in our nervous systems that ring at the slightest hint of danger. Take dark water. Even today, people feel uneasy about lakes that you can't see the bottom of. It doesn't matter how clean the water is, or how safe the guides say it may be. Step into murky water, and suddenly every toe feels exposed. Every ripple feels like a hand reaching for you. This discomfort isn't cultural, it's biological. Our ancestors learned that dark water was where danger lived. Rivers hid crocodiles. Swamps hid snakes. Oceans hid sharks. If you were too casual, you didn't make it back to the camp to share your story. The ones who survived, the ones who passed on their genes, were the ones who hesitated. The ones who said, "No thanks. I'll drink when someone else does it first." And then, there are sudden splashes. Have you ever noticed how quickly humans react to them? A splash behind you in a swimming pool, and you flinch, even though you know it's just your friend cannonballing. That overreaction isn't silliness. It's training from thousands of years ago. In the prehistoric world, a splash often meant one thing. Something big had just moved in the water. And if that something big was moving, it was usually moving toward you. Sarcosuchus didn't announce itself with a roar. It announced itself with an explosion of water, jaws wide, the surface shattered. If your reflexes were sharp enough to jump, maybe you had a chance. If not, you were gone. Even the way humans walk along the edges of rivers and beaches shows this history. Watch carefully, and you'll notice how often people prefer to keep a little distance, as if some part of them knows the bank isn't safe. Sure, we've built docks, piers, lifeguard towers, but beneath that, our instincts remain cautious. We know better than to lean too far over the edge. Fear shaped more than our behavior, it shaped our brains. The amygdala, the little almond-shaped cluster that processes fear, became finely tuned to notice patterns. Rustling grass, rippling water, sudden silence. Silence itself is a trigger. When the jungle stopped buzzing, when the frogs went quiet, something was wrong. Predators were near. Our ancestors who paid attention to these signs survived. Those who didn't, well, their genes didn't make it into the future. It's funny, in a way. Today, those same instincts often seem irrational. We jump at shadows in our own hallway. We feel uneasy swimming in lakes, stocked with nothing scarier than a few trout. We sit in movie theaters and scream at horror films, even though we know the monster isn't real. Fear may sometimes embarrass us, but its roots are profound. It's a survival gift, packaged in adrenaline. Think of the irony. The monsters that could have eaten us in one bite are gone, but the alarms they set in us are still very much alive. Sarcosuchus has been extinct for over 100 million years, but every time someone hesitates before dipping their toes into murky water, that ancient crocodile gets a little nod of recognition. Fear may not feel heroic, but it's part of why we survived when so many others didn't. So the next time you feel your heart leap at a sudden splash or your skin crawl at the thought of deep water, remember you're not weak. You're carrying the ancient memories of survival, the whispers of ancestors who lived in a world where one careless moment meant you were gone. Fear shaped us. It kept us alive. And in some ways it still does, even in the comfort of our modern beds. Though Sarcosuchus and its monstrous contemporaries are long gone, their shadows live on in the creatures we share the world with today. Crocodiles, alligators, sharks, they are not the titans they once were, but they are echoes. Smaller, yes, but still carrying the same design, the same menace, the same uncanny ability to remind us that nature has teeth. Take the crocodile. Today's Nile crocodile may only reach 20 feet, half the length of Sarcosuchus, but don't let that fool you. They are still among the deadliest predators on Earth. Every year, they claim hundreds of lives across Africa. Silent, patient, lurking just beneath the surface, they strike in ways eerily reminiscent of their ancient cousin. The routine hasn't changed in 100 million years. Wait, watch, ambush. They don't need to evolve further because they were perfected long ago. Crocodiles are living fossils, survivors that saw dinosaurs come and go, that weathered the extinction, that wiped out giants. If Sarcosuchus was the booming bass drum of the prehistoric orchestra, modern crocs are the echoing notes that still vibrate through the present. And then there are sharks. Great whites, tiger sharks, bull sharks. They prowl the oceans with a sleekness that makes them almost beautiful if you can get past the teeth. They may not reach megalodon's size, but they're large enough to trigger our deepest instincts. A fin slicing through the water is enough to freeze even the most confident swimmer. Hollywood didn't invent that fear. It simply tapped into something already written in us, an echo of the ancient seas where megalodon ruled supreme. Even in smaller forms, these animals carry the weight of their ancestry. Watch a crocodile slip silently into the water, leaving no ripple, and you are seeing the same motion Sarcosuchus made. Watch a shark breach the surface in a flash of power, and you are seeing the same hunting style that once toppled whales. They are reminders that while the giants disappeared, their blueprints remain, scaled down, but no less effective. Humans have found ways to fight back. Spears, nets, boats, even harpoons and cages. But despite our weapons, these predators still command respect. When we swim in croc-infested rivers or dive in shark-rich waters, we do so knowing the risk. They remind us that no matter how advanced we become, we are still not completely safe. We are guests in their domain, just as our ancestors were. And maybe that's why we continue to tell stories about them, to film documentaries, to make movies. Crocodiles and sharks aren't just animals. They're living connections to a time when monsters dominated the earth. They stir something in us, something older than language, something that whispers, "Be careful, stay alert. This world was never fully yours." So, when you drift to sleep tonight, think of these echoes. Picture a crocodile basking on a riverbank, eyes half-lidded, but watching. Picture a shark gliding effortlessly through blue water, silent, graceful, terrifying. They are the living reminders of an age of giants, scaled down perhaps, but no less extraordinary. They carry the echoes of Sarcosuchus, of Megalodon, of all the one-bite wonders that came before. And they remind us, gently but firmly, that the past is never truly gone. It's a strange thing to think about, isn't it? The fact that you're lying here, safe in your bed, perhaps surrounded by pillows, blankets, maybe even that one blanket you've had for years, that's a little frayed at the edges, but somehow, always, just the right weight for comfort. Compare that to our ancestors, who fell asleep each night in caves or under trees. Their lullaby, not the gentle hum of a fan, but the growl of something nearby, deciding whether or not to wander closer. When you shift your pillow tonight, when you sigh into your sheets, you are practicing a luxury that billions of years of evolution fought tooth and nail, sometimes literally to provide. We forget, in the calmness of our bedrooms, just how extraordinary safety is. No one is lurking in the hallway with a jaw that could snap shut around you in an instant. The only thing you might trip over on your way to the bathroom is a slipper, not a 40-foot crocodile, pretending to be a log. Our predators these days are comically downgraded. We wage war against mosquitoes, gnats, maybe the occasional house spider that scuttles across the ceiling and sends you reaching for a tissue. Compared to Sarcosuchus, compared to lions, compared to eagles that once thought of us as hors d'oeuvres, these creatures are laughably small, and yet we still complain. The mosquitoes are terrible this summer. Imagine telling that to an ancestor who lost an uncle to a crocodile the size of a bus. They'd stare at you, incredulous, before deciding you must be joking. It's in this contrast that gratitude bubbles up. The fact that our homes have doors that shut, windows that lock, roofs that don't let in the rain. We've invented bug spray, citronella candles, entire industries devoted to ensuring that the only bites we suffer in the night come from tiny insects that weigh less than a grain of rice. What a relief that is. How utterly miraculous, when you consider how things used to be. Imagine being an early human, lying down at night on a bed of leaves, knowing that you had no walls to separate you from the dark. You close your eyes, but you never truly relax. Every crack of a twig, every distant roar, every splash in the river makes your heart pound. You pray that tonight is not your night. You curl close to your family, hoping that together you look less appetizing, or at least that someone will hear danger coming in time to shout. Compare that to you, rolling over onto your favorite side, adjusting your blanket so it tucks perfectly beneath your chin, knowing that nothing larger than a moth is going to intrude. The difference is so massive, it's almost comedic. And then there's food. You might drift to sleep tonight with a comfortably full belly, maybe even regretting that second cookie. But our ancestors? They often went to sleep hungry, stomachs aching, wishing they had been braver, faster, luckier at the river. Sometimes they starved because the giants took too much. A crocodile ambushed their prey, a lion stole their kill, or the fish just weren't biting. Survival was a gamble. Dinner was uncertain. Now, our biggest problem is debating what to order. Pizza or Thai, delivery or leftovers. It's a far cry from crouching by the water, praying that you'd be the one who got the fish instead of being the fish. It's funny how quickly gratitude slips away, how we complain about traffic jams, or a broken Wi-Fi connection, or a fridge that hums a little too loudly. Yet, if you were to pluck one of our ancestors from the darkness of their jungle and drop them here, into your room tonight, they would weep with relief. A roof, a bed, a full stomach. No sarcosuchus in sight. They'd probably kiss your pillow. They'd spray bug spray on their skin, as if it were holy water. They'd sit for hours just staring at the lock on the door, marveling that a simple twist of metal could keep predators out. That's what makes bedtime such a profound little ritual. Each night, as you sink into your mattress, you are participating in the victory of survival. Every fiber of your sheets, every inch of your home, is proof that we made it. We escaped the jaws of crocodiles, the talons of eagles, the coils of snakes. We endured long enough to build walls, invent comfort, and shrink our nightly battles down to the scale of bug spray. So breathe deeply now, and let yourself feel that gratitude. You are here, alive, safe. The predators are tiny, the giants are gone. And the only thing left to do is close your eyes, secure in the knowledge that tonight, the only sound you'll hear as you fall asleep is the steady rhythm of your own breath, not the splash of something massive rising from the water to drag you away. And now, as the story draws to a close, imagine the prehistoric world going quiet. The sun has dipped below the horizon, the sky washed in deep purples and fading oranges. The river, that once glittered with danger, now lies still, reflecting the stars as they begin to emerge. The jungle hum softens. The cicadas wind down their endless chorus. Even the predators retreat into shadow, their bellies full, their eyes heavy with the satisfaction of another day's hunt. Picture yourself lying nearby. Not in fear this time, but as an observer safe in imagination. The fire your ancestors tended crackles gently, its glow casting long shadows across the clearing. Around you, your family breathes steadily, their bodies curled together in warmth and trust. For the first time all day, you feel calm. The splashes in the river have stopped. The roars in the distance are fading. A hush has fallen over the prehistoric night. Let that hush seep into you. The tension in your shoulders begins to ease. Your jaw unclenches. The restless thoughts that followed you from your modern day, the emails, the errands, the endless list of small frustrations drift away, like leaves carried gently downstream. In their place comes a stillness, ancient and steady, as if the earth itself is whispering that everything is all right, at least for this moment. The jungle breathes with you. Inhale and feel the humid night air fill your lungs. Exhale and imagine the warmth of your breath, joining the mist that rises from the river. Stars twinkle above, unbothered by the dramas below, shining as they always have, as they always will. Their light has watched over both the giants of the past and the fragile humans who dared to survive them. Tonight, their light watches over you too. Even the giants themselves, in this vision, have grown quiet. The sarcosuchus sinks beneath the water, no longer hunting, only drifting, its ancient eyes finally closing. The great snakes coil into nests. The massive birds fold their wings. Predators and prey alike surrender to the rhythm of sleep. The world, for just a few hours, is at peace. Allow yourself to sink into that peace. Your bed cradles you the way the earth cradled our ancestors in caves and hollows. Your blanket is your shelter, your pillow the soft ground beneath your head. You are safe, safer than any human has ever been. And that safety is a lullaby of its own. Listen to the echoes of the prehistoric night, but hear them fading. The roars grow faint, dissolving into silence. The splashes settle into ripples. Then stillness. The hum of insects becomes distant, like a memory you can barely recall. All that remains is the steady beat of your heart, slow and sure, guiding you deeper and deeper into rest. So close your eyes now. Let the ancient world drift away. Let the quiet of the jungle seep into your bones. And let gratitude for this small miraculous moment of peace, carry you into sleep. You have nothing to fear tonight. The predators are gone. The monsters are only stories, and you are wrapped in safety, drifting into dreams, while the prehistoric jungle grows still and silent around you. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. The monsters have gone quiet, the river has stilled, and now it's your turn to rest. Sleep well, dream deep, and know you're safe from the jaws of prehistory. If you're somehow still awake, don't worry, just let your eyes wander to one of the 2 videos glowing on your screen. Each one will carry you into another story, another night's escape. And before you drift off completely, don't forget to subscribe. It's the simplest way to make sure you're never without a bedtime tale. Good night, and sweet dreams.